Welcome to Sachs Realty's Tuesday Night Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything real estate. Each week, we deliver expert information enabling you to make better informed decisions while keeping more money in your pocket. If you're interested in real estate, this is your show. Hey guys, welcome to our Tuesday Night Podcast, where we are live tonight. Melissa and I, we are not usually sitting together at the same table,
no,
the same room. Tonight we are.
Yeah.
So we've been burning the late night oil, as they say. We've been very busy here, working on all kinds of great things. Here at Sachs Realty, we're continually innovating. Tonight we're talking about home inspections. This is a very hot topic. For the last 2 years, buyers have been waiving their rights to home inspections. In fact, it's still happening. We're seeing it. We're seeing that as is contracts are coming through. Speaking with agents all over the country, they're still saying, despite all of the news, despite everything that you hear about, buyer's remorse, buying houses without home inspections, buying problems, buying deferred maintenance, buying broken things, paying top dollar for that too, not realizing what they're getting into. They're still doing it. And I think, Melissa, a lot of times, does a buyer know to waive an inspection?
How are they going to know? How are they going to know, being a buyer, to waive the home inspection? And why does this continue to happen?
So, I believe that, and look, tonight we may say some things that aren't very popular, amongst maybe other agents, maybe home inspectors. But, I have to tell you what I believe, what I feel. I don't advise buyers to buy something without a home inspection, even if it's an as-is inspection with the right to terminate, where they can just walk away at the end. You should be able to walk away.
Yeah.
You should be offered the opportunity. Now, if it comes back, that the, agent on the other side, the listing agent, says, hey, you should, we would accept your offer if you bought it without, I'm going to deliver that message to the buyer, and it's completely up to the buyer at that point. But, I don't like it. It would keep me up at night. It does. In fact, if you're listening tonight and you're buying a house, and look, guys, this is a live show. So if you're watching during this live broadcast, comment your questions, comment your comments.
Mm-hmm.
We would like to know, if you bought a house without a home inspection and you found something out later. We had a poll before the show. I don't know. It still might be up. Would you buy a house without an inspection? There's a poll. I think, where are we at right now?
So 20 of you have voted so far, and we have yes with 5%, no with 85%, which is good. I'm glad that's the percentage. And then not sure is at 9%.
Yeah. And maybe the not sure, I have, and I'll just give you an example. I know somebody who is a contractor of 30 years, and, he buys houses to flip, and he still gets a home inspection. He'll have, somebody go in with him and look at the house, whether it's a team of people even. In fact, Melissa, I've done quite a flipping through the years. I built houses for a long time. I started as a contractor in 1989. And I think you were just talking to an agent that had mentioned that we had looked at an investment commercial building that was in. Tell everybody about that.
Yeah. So we were looking at investment commercial building, and refresh me, which client were we talking about here?
No client. I was the client. You talked to the agent, and he said, I remember Todd brought a whole team.
He did. Yep. That's what he said, that he was very impressed because Todd showed up with everyone, because he needed to know every single detail of that commercial property. He needed to know, because there are so many different components that go into, let alone a house, but a commercial property, structural engineer, you need to find out all of the different parts. And how are you going to do that by yourself? You're just not going to be able to. And this gentleman was incredibly impressed because he does not see
on the other side.
Yeah, the agent on the other side.
It was a listing agent.
Not impressed at all. It was thoroughly impressed because this is not normal. He has never seen this before.
Well, we
And
pointed out things that he didn't know
Yeah,
about it. It was actually
exactly.
structurally unsound. It would
Yep.
have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it was one of those things where, yeah, it was still a good deal. But, yeah. So, guys, you're going to hear tonight that we want you to have a home inspection. We'll answer as many questions as we can. We appreciate your comments and we appreciate you watching tonight.
Mhm.
But, and if you know somebody looking to buy a house, this may be one of our episodes that you want to share.
Absolutely.
And tonight is,
Oh my gosh, we're at 2 years, guys. 2 years doing our podcast, bringing you amazing content, having you follow and comment and just be there every step of the way. We're greatly appreciative.
episode 104
It's amazing.
of our Tuesday Night Podcast.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels great.
Anyway, so why should you get a home inspection? And I think the important thing here, and tonight we're talking about residential, we're talking about people that primarily that will buy the house to live in. So we're addressing buyers that are owner occupants, not investors, because that's sort of like a completely different, set of rules. If you're buying it as an investor, you're probably looking for something that's in as bad a shape as possible to get the best deal. But when you're buying a home to live in and you're getting a mortgage, depending on the type of mortgage, if you're getting a government-backed mortgage like FHA, VA, or USDA, the appraisal process will actually be an inspection for safety items in itself. But we're talking about, the home inspection, someone that you will hire to bring into the house to check it out and let you know what it is that you're buying. What have you bargained for? And so that when you go to look at a house initially, before you put in your offer and it gets accepted, you're not really spending a whole lot of time in the house.
Right.
You may think that you are, but you're kind of uncomfortable if it's being occupied by the sellers.
Yeah.
You kind of feel uncomfortable because you're in their house.
Yep.
So a lot of times you're not paying attention to the things that you should pay attention to.
And in this market, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Todd,
No.
but it is a short window of time. I mean, I think you're allotted anywhere. You probably can have an hour, but maybe 30 to 45 minutes. You may have someone that's coming into the house at the same exact time. They may have overlapping appointments. So there's no way that you're going to be able to take a deep dive and really, you can do like a little, once over, but there's no way you're going to be able to get into everything.
Yeah. You're rushing.
Yeah.
You're kind of,
You're
you're excited, you're nervous,
Yes.
you're not paying attention to, you don't know whether the faucets leak or, appliances work.
And unless you have some construction and experience, or maybe have been a homeowner before, you're not going to know what to look for.
Yeah. And as a buyer, I've missed stuff too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you want another set of eyes.
Yep.
But let's talk about, so you want a home inspection, you want to make sure. We're going to dive into what types of inspections you should have. But I think that, a couple things, number one, if your agent's telling you that you shouldn't get a home inspection, I think that's, bad advice personally. Professionally, I think it's bad advice. But, how do you pick a home inspector? And so you can have a bad home inspector. And one of the things that, I always look for is, does the inspector have contracting background? Because, I know here in Maryland, I think it's like a 72-hour classroom course that you take, and you have to pass a test in order to be a home inspector. But, we call and interview home inspectors.
You would feel much more confident with someone who has been in that arena, who's been working, who knows the ins and outs of homes. And if someone sitting in a classroom having 72 hours is really just not going to give you the confidence, I think, that you really need.
And I think the other thing is, agents are the ones that typically recommend these inspectors.
Yep.
And that comes with its own caveat as well. A lot of the comments that we get and that we hear, unfortunately, sometimes an agent may recommend somebody, and there's a term in our industry that is not a deal killer. So you've got inspectors that, kind of go overboard, but you also have inspectors that don't do enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And, because they don't want the deal to be spoiled or whatever. An inspection isn't always to kill the deal. If you're buying a 50 or 60-year-old house, there's probably going to be a lot of little things that need to be, addressed in time as a homeowner. You're not renting it. You're not going to call the landlord. These are things that become your responsibility. But there are major considerations, major expenses that you need to consider that, I see a lot of people using all their money to buy a house.
I know. I know.
They put all their money down. They even get gift money from their parents. They don't have $5,000 in the bank.
No. And it's very scary to know that if you go into a home and you have not had that home inspection, the chances of something happening, it's a possibility. And then you're out of money.
So a lot of times your agent will say, hey, look, do you have a home inspector? We always ask, do you want someone, that and most people have no idea. They don't know who inspectors are or home inspectors are.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the client will just say, who do you recommend? But, as someone that's buying a home, you want to be able to lean on an experienced agent, a realtor, to kind of guide you through the process. But at the same time, it's all going to fall back on you ultimately. So you want to ask some vital questions. How long have they been in business? Is this the owner of the company or is it staff? What is that inspector's qualifications? Do they have any background in contracting? And that's a tough question because a lot of them don't. You think, why would somebody be a home inspector if they're a contractor? That doesn't preclude you from bringing along a contractor as well. So, I would much rather compensate a contractor $500 or $600 that really has a lot of contracting experience to, go with you when you're talking about spending $400,000 or $500,000 more or less, and paying for something for a long period of time. It's good due diligence up front. But you really have to make sure that you're hiring the right inspector and that they didn't, in my opinion, just take a course and, check a box.
Right. Exactly. You want it to be quality. This, as Todd just said, it's an expense to get the home inspection done. Of course, in every state, it's going to be different. But from what we see, $500, $600, and you want to make sure that it's quality. It's not being just breezed through and you're getting a good, accurate report.
Yeah. And the other thing that goes with that is when you're putting together an inspection addendum, depending on what state you're in, but here in Maryland, we have basically two types of inspection addendums. One is what I consider traditional inspection addendum, which is what we've historically used until this craziness of the, skyrocketing home prices and the heated competition, multiple offers and things like that. Then came along this as is inspection with the right to terminate. So depending on what state you're in, I know in the West, I know, in Texas, there's, they have more contingency contracts where you can do whatever you want within that period of time. But somewhere when you're buying a house, if there's an addendum, an inspection addendum, the important thing is that if you don't want that to exclude you, or you want to kind of soften the blow, you may have your agent write something that states that during the home inspection, you only come back to the sellers and ask for big ticket items. So you might say, this is an inspection, but, for anything less than $3,000, for example, either for individual items or collective repairs, as long as it doesn't surpass $3,000, for instance, then you'll move forward anyway. And this is kind of important. It lets the seller know that you want to know what you're buying, but it also lets the seller know that you're not going to nickel and dime them. Because like I said, if you're going to buy that 50 or 60-year-old house, there are probably things in the house that the seller lives with And
Yeah.
quite honestly, after you buy a house, there are going to be things that break that you may not fix too.
Mm-hmm.
You might just live with it. So, now that the inspection purpose, in my opinion, is not to, ask for all these nickel and dime items, but it's to identify the big items. It's to identify what it is that you're buying. And it's to, ask for, and we'll get more specific, things that are really safety items. And, what I mean by that is, let's say your deal falls through. If we're under contract on a property and, we're getting, we're under contract, we're having a home inspection. If I'm the agent representing the buyer, when we're looking at that laundry list of repairs that are necessary, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to focus in and pick out or bring my client's attention to the things that the seller would need to fix regardless if they, kick you to the curb when you ask for things or not. Because when you go to the seller and you ask them for things, that's an opportunity for the seller to say goodbye. And so, it's kind of nerve wracking. You're like, well, should I ask for these things? Because if I do, your agent's going to be like, well, if you ask for them, that they can walk if they have backups or whatever. But specifically the things that would become safety items that they would need to disclose to another buyer based on your state's disclosure laws, which is important to know, they're the things that they would have to fix anyway. So a lot of times the agent's like, well, if you ask for that, they're going to not repair it. Well, as a buyer's agent, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Here in Maryland, they're called material facts. And, I want that seller to know. I want them to understand what is wrong from the inspection report. I want them to have the report in a lot of cases, because I'm going to tell the listing agent, I'm going to say, well, they're going to have to fix these anyway. So the listing agent is going to go to the seller and be like, yeah, he's right. You're going to need to fix these things. If you let this contract go, these are items on that inspection report that you are going to need to fix. So I certainly focus in on those.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's any life decision to me. Why would you go into something completely blind and, uneducated on what you're purchasing or living with, or, anything in your life is incredibly important. So excellent points on everything that you're saying.
So let's kind of talk. And I just have some notes here. You guys don't see me with my notes this angle. You can actually see my desk, but I do have some points that I want to make sure that I don't miss. I want to talk about what's important. Do we have any questions we can kind of segue here?
We do, absolutely. I have to say, Cato
questions.
Kane said, I'm recruiting Todd to come out to Arizona to conduct our inspection.
Let's go.
We love it. Love it. Love it. And then Hazel Wares, we did talk about how much do they generally charge to inspect a house. We just talked about Maryland. It's different in every state, depending where you are.
And it's based on bedrooms, a lot of times, and square footage. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And then Cato Kane, again, no possible way I would waive the inspection. We are looking at buying new construction, and we'll get independent inspection on top of builder's inspection.
Yes.
Brilliant.
We'll talk about that too. We've got a story.
Yep. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
But very, very advisable. And Danuska C., thank you, Todd and Melissa. Happy anniversary. Please give us a summary at the end of the show on the key items to look for the first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Good stuff. Guys, questions. And if you're listening to this video and, it's not live anymore, we will still do our best to answer your comments, your questions. So drop them in the comments section, regardless of whether we're live or not at that time. But let's talk about some big items. Let's kind of go over some big inspection items. Don't take this as a complete list, because, you should listen to your home inspector. But I want to talk about, should you be there for the home inspection? I want to talk about, should your agent be there for the home inspection? But let's go first through a couple of these, top items. First, I want to mention that at least here in Maryland, in our inspection addendums, we have, a time period that we're allowed to get the inspection. So let's say the contract was accepted today. A lot of times the inspection addendum will say, home inspection within 5 days or 7 days. A lot of times that's not enough time. Sometimes it is, as things slow down a little bit, we're seeing brakes being pumped right now in sales, but so inspectors aren't as busy, and or maybe they are more busy than they were because people weren't getting inspections. But,
exactly.
5 days may not be enough. 3 days, 5 days. I would say 7 days. My recommendation. I always put 7 days, and then there's a place for. You've got a whole list of the types of inspections that you want to have performed. Ours probably 7 or so different types of inspections. You can check off which ones you want to have inspected, whether it's chimney, radon, things like that. There's a box, and I strongly encourage anyone to do this, to make a note that says any other inspection that your home inspector feels required or suggests to do. And I always say, give yourself a couple more days for that. So if you have, let's say, 7 days to get a home inspection, maybe that box or the comment that says, plus any inspection that our inspector recommends, maybe within 10 days from contract acceptance. A lot of these dates are based on from contract acceptance, the date that the buyer and seller agree to the sale terms. So, that gives you a couple extra days, because if you're pushing that inspection to the limit of the time period that you have, and then the inspector says, well, I would get a structural engineer in here, or I would get a heating and air contractor, or I would get a licensed electrician to address these areas, they would be what I'm talking about as the additional inspections that you want to make sure that you have the time to perform, and you may not be able to get somebody within that time period. So I would, extend that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. There's a quick question. Vault, if the seller has had a pre-inspection done, should you get one anyways?
I love this question.
Me too.
I love this question. So a lot of times the buyers were getting home inspections and they were saying, look, we already had a home inspection. Here it is. We're not letting you get one, or we don't want, we're not fixing anything. These are the items, or these are the things we will fix. These are the discovered items. If I'm representing a seller, I'm always, hesitant for them to get a home inspection, because that becomes material facts, right? Because if I'm representing a seller, the buyer may come in with no inspection. So why do I want to tee my seller up for, liability or whatever? If the buyer's agent or the buyer's coming in saying, we're not asking for an inspection. So, but let's say like this great question, should you get a home inspection if the seller has one? Yes. You want your own inspector. You want your own independent analysis, not somebody else's. And I'm not saying that they're dishonest, but, there are different levels of inspection. And, if I'm representing you, we're going to have somebody that is experienced in contracting, that has flipped a couple houses, maybe, that, we dive in with our inspectors. We interview inspectors and they leave, so, we'll have an inspection company that we work with a lot with our clients. And then I'll call up and say, hey, I need Nick. And they'll say, well, Nick is not available. I'm like, well, why isn't Nick available? Well, he left. Well, now I have to either decide, am I going to talk to my client about using another inspector after I've already recommended this one, or not, or what we're going to do. But I always make sure they have a lot of experience. I want my client to have their own independent analysis of, someone that they hired that cares about them.
Mm-hmm. It's just too risky. You don't know the backstory. They could have a personal relationship. You just don't know. There's no guarantees there.
Now I have, I want to talk, before we get into the major components, I want to address, should you be there for the home inspection? 100%. absolutely, positively, it's worth taking off of work. I hear a lot of people say, well, do I have to be there because I'm working and I only have 5 days or I only have 7 days? 100% be there. An important thing to ask your inspector, because coming through COVID, a lot of the inspectors didn't, the pre-COVID was the inspector walked the buyers through with them, and they would acknowledge and they would say things like, this is your electric panel, this is your emergency shutoff or your main disconnect if something's happening. Or this is your main water shutoff. If you have a problem in the house, this is where you turn the water off to prevent it from gushing inside. So, here's where your filter is to replace. So then what happened was COVID hit, and the inspector said, I don't want anybody in the house with me. And I don't know about you guys, but we've seen a lot of bad habits come out of COVID, where, this has really, made people not, it's a very sensitive topic, obviously, but and what I've seen is a lot of people are hiding behind that, still using that same, sort of, mentality. The buyer should be there. They should be with the inspector. If you're an inspector, you may not like me saying that, but you need to show these people that are paying you $500, $600, $700. You need to have them come through with you. Now, I'm not expecting them to get on the roof with you, but you need to show them what's going on. So that's what I like from my home inspectors. I want them to, kind of walk my clients around, explain to them the ins and the outs. And so the other big question that we get a lot of time is a lot of agents will say, well, I don't go to home inspections. Mm-hmm. Number one, how'd they get in the house? So, did you just open up the door for them and then leave? Make a way for them to get in the locked house with a lockbox on it and then say, see you later, enjoy your home inspection. But I want to talk about this because whether your agent should be there, it depends on who your agent is. If it's an agent that at this point of your home inspection, you signed a contract with them and you don't like them anymore, you may not want them there. Maybe it's better for just you and your home inspector. That's not what I recommend. I recommend the agent be there. The agent should certainly be there, and not to be a home inspector, but to make sure that everything is flowing well. That they're taking notes. Not to whether something's broken or not, and whether it should be fixed or not. But if the buyer may want an estimate on something, so you may have somebody that you could call and get them a quick estimate. But one of the things that I hear, and Melissa, we had a conversation with my attorney, and we were talking about the real estate commission here, in complaints. And I asked him, I just said, hey, what's the biggest complaint that you're seeing? And the number one complaint that he is seeing is that the buyers are taking their buyer agents to the board complaining about how they felt they were misadvised during the home inspection process. Yeah. We had a local home inspector that said that they heard the agent saying, oh, don't worry about that. That's no big deal. Don't worry about that. I got a guy for that. I can, don't worry about that. These are the things that are coming back, right? That I feel that or will be coming back to really haunt those agents.
Oh, I think so. I mean, we went through a very reckless period of time to just turn your back and be advised to not have the home inspection. This is your investment. This is where you're living. This is where some people have families. You need to make sure the safety is there. You're not going to know. And it's incredibly risky. We say it over and over and over again. But also, I wanted to mention part of being a real estate agent is showing care. It's part of your licensing, and so you would want to show care and show up to the home inspection. Granted, yes, it's 3 hours long. That's part of your job. It's part of what you're there for. You're there to care for your client. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, and we're going to get into the components. Do we want to take a couple questions?
Yeah, let's take a couple questions. Yep, I did. So Hazel Wares did bring something up, and I just want to make it very clear. I thought the inspector was qualified to do all aspects of a inspection, electrical, plumbing, roof, etc. Wow, news to me. Thanks, very informative. So I think it just talking about that part on the home inspection addendum.
And they should be knowledgeable of what to look for. They're not going to troubleshoot. So if there's an outlet that's not working, they're not going to tell you why the outlet's not working. Or, if there isn't enough power in the house, if it's electrical, they're not going to tell you what needs to be done for that. But they should be able to take the panel cover off. They should have a general knowledge of plumbing. They should be looking for leaks, things like that, running all the appliances. We'll dive into that. But yeah, there can be reason to bring in more professionals. When I'm taking a client out to look for a house, if we're buying the house, I'm collecting in my mind, who I really think that who I should recommend.
Yeah.
If I'm seeing that there are, red flags. Now, I'm a little different. I'm not a home inspector, but I've been a contractor since 1989. So I'm not saying that all agents should have my experience. I've taken houses, perfectly good houses, and completely disassembled them down to their studs. So, I mean, I'm not an electrician. I'm not a plumber, not a heating and air expert, but I have a very general knowledge of what I'm looking for. So when I'm looking, at a home, it's a little bit different because I'm saying, I'm looking at this going, yeah, I see double tap breakers, which means that the breaker's overloaded. And though it may be allowed, and depending on when the home was built, it's not going to be good when you plug your hairdryer in and, if you blow a circuit. And if you want to add things, a lot of times electrical panels are completely full and undersized, and then you want to put a hot tub in or something, and it's impossible. Now you're looking at a $4,000 or $5,000 power up.
Yeah.
So.
And these are really good questions. Like you should be constantly having things that get an older home, you think of the hot tub, and your agent should, that's something that we need to look into and make sure that there's going to be capacity on the electrical panel. So just stuff like that, that's future talk and what your planning is.
Might be a shed on the property
Could
that you want to run lights to. Maybe you want to put, more receptacles outside. Maybe you want to finish a basement that's unfinished.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all things that you need to run additional circuits where you may not have the power to do it.
Exactly. Hazel Wares, another question. Can I, as the buyer, deduct the cost of the inspection off the price of the house? What would be the main thing to have inspected? Yeah,
and usually the inspections are on you. The seller's not going to pay for your home inspection. If you want to negotiate your price offer that keeps that in consideration, and that's important. I mean, that's a good thing to note because you don't want to just put a contract on a house, kind of willy-nilly, right? I mean, you want to make sure it's something that you want to buy because you could spend a couple $1,000s on inspections, depending on whether it's private well and septic and things like that.
Right.
So, if you walk away from it and then, you make a habit out of doing this 2 and 3 times, can be very expensive.
Exactly. And Chris Trulio, I stopped shopping in March of 2021 when I was being told to waive inspection. That's when I knew the bubble was becoming unsustainable.
It's terrible advice. Yeah. Buying
terrible.
a house without inspection.
Yep.
And I can tell you, story after story after story from people in this state and out of state. I mean, we have a lot of inquiries that come through, people asking from, our podcast, asking questions, sending in emails, and you're free to do that. Just give us a couple days, depending on what it is. I mean, it may take 4 or 5 days for us to get back to you because we do get a lot. And Joe, if you want to pop up the my email address there. You guys are free to reach out no matter where you are.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of go over some of the components that are important. And first and foremost, one of the biggest things that happens to a house when it starts to deteriorate the most is when water penetration is getting inside. Water is terrible for a house. It's meant to be outside and away from the foundation. So first and foremost is, roof, having the roof inspection or roof inspected. And, a lot of inspectors don't get on roofs now. They'll use drone photography and things like that. I like an inspector that's going to climb up on the roof. I think that, now if it's a real steep 12-12 pitch, something, crazy, you're going to probably need a roofer to get up there and spend extra money to have a roofer get up there. But, some of it can be seen from the attic, but water penetration, you're going to see a lot of it around chimneys, pipes, vent pipes, holes that are coming out of the roof that have some type of boot or flashing or caulk. This is where, you get a lot of water that gets inside. The age of the roof, typically you're looking at it in thirds. Is it in the first, the second, or third phase of its life expectancy? And if it's in its final third, roofs can be very expensive. And a lot of times people live in states where you get hail damage. And, if you live in a state like that, you probably will get a roof for free. A lot of, or not free, but it's in your insurance. I have a friend of mine that, in Texas that does, owns a roofing company. And he says that people never pay for their roofs because usually by the time it's end of life, it has a lot of, big hail damage, and the insurance company will come out and replace the roof as part of their policy. Now you pay a lot for that, but that's not in many states. So you want to know how old the roof is. And, another important thing is a roof can be multiple layers. So, I like a roof to be ripped off down to, new paper so that you could see plywood that needs to be replaced, if any. And a lot of times, they'll put 2 layers of shingles on. It's just very heavy, but it's a cheap fix for a seller if they need a new roof and there's only 1 layer. They might just go right over top. So it is important that the inspector lets you know how many layers are on the roof, what the approximate age of the roof is, and when you'll be looking to replace that, because that can be a really expensive.
I was just going to say, if that's near end of life for the roof, that needs to be factored into your negotiations if it's going to be a huge expense for you to replace it.
Yeah, and if you're buying a slate roof, they're
yeah.
very expensive. They could be $100,000 or more for the roof replacement. They last a long time, but if they're broken, slate pieces, it can be very expensive to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else to mention about water penetration. I know a lot of homes here have basements in Maryland, and sometimes there is an outside steps that lead down to like the exterior basement door going outside. That floods a lot. I've seen it get flooded a lot. Sometimes the drainage isn't completely clear from leaf debris or dirt or whatever. But that water can come right inside the basement. So something else to pay attention to as far as water goes.
Yeah, and grades, positive grades going away from your foundation. Inspector's going to check that, make sure that it doesn't look like, you're going to have a problem when it rains. And some people say, what's a basement? So if you're living in a state where you don't have basements are living space below grade. So, it might be partially below grade in the ground, or fully in the ground. And here in Maryland, we have a lot of basements. They're actually very desired. We have a lot of basement problems, issues that come along with basements, but they can be very nice space, and it's easy, very inexpensive add on square footage because you're basically
it's a whole nother level.
Yeah, it's a whole nother level of living space.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's talk about heating and air systems. This is something that is really expensive that you want to make sure you have inspected. And a lot of times, your inspector will note that things are end of life. And that could be the case with the heating and air system here locally. Our heating and air systems, you see maybe 12 to 15 years before they need replacement. You can go into a house that's 20 or 30 years old and it still has the same original furnace or, heating and air system. The problem is, with that is that a lot of the Freon, what cools the house, a lot of that Freon coolant, it's changed to be more environmentally safe. So they can be very expensive and, people may not be willing to service them or work on them based on the Freon, or may recommend you getting a whole new system.
Yeah.
But more importantly is the efficiency. So, it may be working, it may be 30 years old, but it's not going to be as efficient or as inexpensive to run as the newer equipment will. And if you're in an area where there's heat pumps, we have a lot of heat pumps here in Maryland. They've gotten better, but it's cold.
Yeah.
It is cold. When we get down into, below 30 degrees, it's a cooler heat. And a lot of people don't like them. So, a lot of people prefer, oil or propane or something like that. But you want to have those heating and air systems inspected, and you want to know what you have. And, a lot of times people will say, well, I'm not going to replace the heating and air system. You need to budget for it. And, because it may be operational, but a lot of times the sellers may say, well, we'll give you a home warranty, or the agent may say, well, we'll give you a home or suggest a home warranty where you spend $400 or $500 or more a year. But you have to look at those contracts too, because a lot of times they don't replace the equipment and people get really upset.
Yeah.
And they think that it will be replaced.
And home warranties, they're great. They're great. And especially if you really are walking into something blind, it's nice to have that added protection, but absolutely make sure that you are clear on what is covered with the contract.
Yep. The big things I want to talk about heating and air systems is, the ductwork will tell a lot of the story, if they've been serviced well, whether they're clean, whether the air filter, is clean. And, a lot of times they'll have stickers on the furnace where you can see, or the heat exchanger where it will show service dates. That's important to know. Your home inspector should also be looking to see if there's any recall items. So a lot of them will take the serial numbers down off of the units themselves and run a sort of in all appliances, run a recall search and let you know if anything can be fixed for no charge. But you want to pay attention to, if you have a multi-level house and only one heating and air system, you really want to make sure that you're seeing how well especially if it's in the summertime or it's a hotter climate state, making sure that second floor cools down well, because, the system may be working well, but it may not have proper returns. And you may be 15 degrees sometimes or more hotter on the second floor than you are on the first floor. And, that can be very expensive to fix.
Absolutely. And then we have vault. With older homes over 30 years, should one worry about the septic, and can septic inspection usually identify major issues that could arise?
Yeah. So if you have a private well or septic, and we could talk about that now, certainly you want to have those inspected. So what we're talking about is, when you don't have a public water source or sewer source, you may have a private system, private well, private septic. And what that means is you need to get those inspected. So if we're talking about the well, there's a yield test to make sure that it's actually producing enough water. And then also there's a water quality test to make sure that the drinking water that you're ingesting and cooking with and things like that is safe to drink. So there are two tests that you want to make sure that you do. But as far as the septic system, when you start getting into septic systems that are older systems, original systems of the house, 30, 40, 50 years old, chances are you're going to need a new septic system one day sooner than later. And they can be very expensive. Depending on where you live, depending on, whether the ground perks, it drains well, you may get into really expensive systems. It could be $30,000 or more. And what we're talking about are the drain fields. And we do have a video on that as well on our YouTube channel. If you just search septic, I actually went along with a septic inspector, and he talked about, the how the inspector can tell whether grease, which is destroys septic systems and kind of speeds up the life longevity of the septic system.
There it is.
Yeah, Joe's pulling it up now, but basically, if you get a septic inspection, they should be testing the drain fields. That's a process, and your home inspector is not going to do that. That is a septic inspection, a specialty contractor that you're going to get out, and they actually have a probe that they will stick in the ground in the fields. They'll identify the fields. They will check with the county, find out where they are, where they're located, when they were put in, things of that nature. There may be drawings on it. They will look at the tank itself. They will check the baffles that are making sure that they're separating the waste, from the solids and the liquids. And, so that's a great question, but yeah. 100% get a well and septic inspection if you have private water and sewer.
Absolutely. And Danuska, I know you said many houses listed have private sewers. Is it a problem compared to a public one? Todd pretty much touched on that, but there is definitely a difference.
And a lot of people like well water. I mean, they think it, your city water, your municipal water has, some people say more of a chlorine taste to it, to kill the bacteria and things like that. A lot of people like well water, and I wouldn't sway away from a house that has well and septic, but make sure that you're getting those inspections, which could add, another, $500 or $600 to the, I would think, depending on where you live.
Yeah.
Locally here, that's about, for well and septic tests.
Yep, definitely. Celia K, our inspection revealed that roof is at the end of life.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to ask the seller to split the replacement cost with us?
Yeah. I mean, again, depending on, what kind of competition you have, I mean, having an open conversation with the seller's agent is very important, kind of go back and forth. Here in Maryland, we're a statutory state, which means everything has to be in writing. So I do a lot of asking, not in writing, in, sort of like theoretically speaking, or, do you think, I'm asking the agent, do you think the seller would contribute to a new roof? I'm asking questions because when I put it in writing that the buyer wants a new roof, that's sort of drawing the line in the sand to where the seller could walk away. So it's important to have a dialogue and kind of negotiate that. But I think that, if it's a big expense in the house, you're paying a premium for the house. I mean, I'm certainly going to try and get a new roof out of it. If not some assistance.
Mm-hmm. And this is just, it's really, I hate hearing stuff like this. I was told the AC was less than 15 years old by my realtor, and I later found out it was older, and now I need to replace it and will cost between $7,000 and $10,000.
Yeah. My question would be, did you get a home inspection? Because the inspector should be telling you the age of the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's old, they should give you an age range. So if they say, well, this looks like it's probably, from the 80s, mid 80s because of this or that, or the way the flue is or whatever. But you should definitely, the inspector should be telling you ages of the operating systems.
Mm-hmm. And, this is a question because people do ask us all the time about possibly doing it on their own and not using a real estate agent. Gary Sunitization. Hi, I'm in the early stages of buying in San Fernando a single family home in Vallejo, California with a Melrose and transacting privately without realtors. Sellers are located out of state. What other factors are there to consider? A lot.
Yeah. I mean, get a home inspection, make sure that you have your state's, addendums that are required. If it's prior to, was there an age on the home?
No, there's no age of the
prior
home.
to 1978, you're going to need a federal lead paint. You want to make sure you're still getting a home inspection, and relying on your independent home inspector for advice on, what else maybe needs to be inspected. Look, there's a lot of, there are a lot of people that feel that real estate agents don't do anything.
Yeah.
And it hurts me to hear those comments because, you've got good and bad in any profession. But I can tell you on the single largest purchase and investment, and by the way, a home is sometimes the only investment that one ever makes in their lifetime. They don't ever have, enough to invest in stocks, or nowadays they're not fortunate enough to have pension plans at their jobs. So a lot of times the buyers, this is their only investment. So, why would you go at this without, number one, making sure that you have a very good agent? And I'm not talking about a top producer, because that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good agents. Checking reviews, interviewing, asking critical questions, what they're going to do to, critical questions. What are you going to do to guide me through the process? You should not be going at buying a house without representation.
Yeah. And so many times, you all have reached out to us that, you have the initial contact and there's no follow-up and there's no check-in, and they feel that there's no negotiating on their behalf. And those are the key things that you really need to find out from your agent that you're interviewing. Are they going to go to bat for you? Exactly.
So let's move along. Let's talk about electrical systems. We touched on it a little bit, but this is kind of important. I have a friend of mine who is a electrical contractor. He's a master electrician here locally. And we were having a conversation, and I said, would you put your daughter in a house that had aluminum wire? And he said, hell no. That's exactly what he said. Not saying that a house that has aluminum wire is a fire hazard. I'm not saying that, but it can be. And, there are things that are done because aluminum wiring, most of the times you'll find doesn't have proper grounding. And, when you have a lot of fires, it's because of aluminum wire. And, in the house, it's like knob and tube. Through the years, they realized that, hey, there are safer ways, safer materials to use. Now, if your house has aluminum wire, and, make sure that it's grounded properly. You can put pigtails in the boxes, the outlets, you pull them off, and you can actually ground them there. There are ways to do it, but have a professional do it. But, aluminum wiring is kind of scary because, if you're buying a house that's older and it has aluminum wire, it's a very costly upgrade. And same with power ups. And what I mean by power up is when you pull or open the cover of the electrical panel, you can see the main breaker, usually at the top, and it will have a number on it. And a lot of times it'll say like 100. That means 100 amp service coming in the house or in that breaker, or it's a 100 amp breaker. Well, if you want to take that to a 200 amp breaker, a lot of times you have to get your service company, your electrical service provider, to either put a bigger drop outside, or run a new line, whatever. And then you have to get somebody to upgrade that panel, and then you're going to bring it up to code, make sure all the grounding. So it can be very expensive. So that's a big consideration. And a lot of times, I just had a buyer in another state reached out a couple of weeks ago, and they said, we realized when we moved in, we wanted a home office. Well, there was not enough outlets. And every time we plugged in to work in the bedroom, because they were making that an office, it blew the breaker in like 3 other rooms. And, because they were all strung together. So these are the kinds of things that I'm talking about when you have older homes that, you may want to have an electrician come in and tell you your home inspector is not going to dive that deep. You may need electrical contractor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of those older homes I know that do have that, and you would definitely want to have that checked out. Absolutely.
Moving right along, chimneys. If you have a wood burning stove in your home, make sure you have those inspected.
Mm-hmm.
I have people, they love them. They look at them, they go, wow, it's got a fireplace. It's great. And they realize it costs $5,500 or $6,000 in repairs,
Yeah.
because they didn't get a chimney inspection. A lot of times you have to clean the chimney to have it inspected if there's a lot of soot, but the flue may have cracks in it, in the mortar, if it's an older house, or just hasn't been cared for. The top could need a lot of work. You could have bricks that are spalling and need replacement, things like that. You may need a liner, and these are very expensive repairs to make it safe.
Yeah, and I've been on chimney inspections, and a lot of these things you will never know that they're there unless they, take the scope and go inside and get a good look at it. So incredibly important.
Make sure that your sewer pipes, if you have public, if you have private, obviously you're gonna check that out. But if you have a public sewer, make certain that you have it scoped. And I had a situation where, I was advising somebody out of state that was buying a house. And I said, look, make sure you get the sewer line scoped. And we kind of, FaceTimed and we're walking through. And I said, you know what, right here, and it was on a slab, right here in this laundry room, there was no washer and dryer, but you could see where it drains into it. And now we found out why there was no washer and dryer in the house. And I said, make sure that when your guy with the scope comes, that he goes in right here, because it was an open drain. A lot of times they're not going to pull a toilet. They will go to a clean out outside with their camera scope. They'll go inside as far as they can. They did not do what I had suggested. The people bought the house. They moved in. They hooked their washing machine up. And guess what? That drain was clogged. Needed to be snaked. It cost $1,000 to have it remedied. They could have asked the sellers for that. They could have said, you know what? But they did not insist. You're hiring these inspectors. You need to insist that they do what you want them to do. You're the boss. You're the one writing a check. If they don't want to do what you want to do, find somebody else. Mm-hmm. But anyway, scope these sewer lines. You might say, well, there's no trees. It's a 50-year-old house. It's an old, cast iron pipe. Maybe it's terracotta, whatever. Tree roots get into these sewer lines and clog them up. And, if the tree is gone, it could be a neighbor's tree. Maybe they had the tree removed a year ago. Maybe it was removed 4 or 5 years ago, but the roots are still in there. And, they only have one person living in the house. It's been fine. But you move in, you start doing a family of fours, laundry, showers, things like that. You have a backup. You got a mess.
Yeah.
And a big repair. Could be $12,000 or $15,000 to repair a sewer line.
Yeah.
And a lot of times these home warranties that we're talking about do not cover outside of the house.
Yeah.
So you can get insurance policies on it. Check it out. Make sure your sewer lines are clean.
Yeah.
It's a very inexpensive. Here locally, probably $200. You can get somebody to come out and scope your sewer. I heard somebody say they lived in Massachusetts that it was $600 or $700. Money well spent.
Yeah. Get it done for sure. We do have a question, and I don't want to get off topic. And it is not about a home inspection, but it is a good question. I think it's valid and needs to have your say. JJ Ayers, why are those buyers in the last 2 years at high risk to be underwater in their home if they have a fixed rate mortgage of 2.85? I keep hearing that on other channels.
Yeah. Underwater on their home could mean that the home isn't worth what they paid for it. If they're going to stay in the home, they probably have no risk at all. The risk comes when they have to sell. So, if you're putting down, and a lot of times people say, let's say you bought a house for $400,000 and you put 20% down. That meant that you put $80,000 plus closing costs. You're probably $100,000 into the house. Okay. Let's say at that point you owe $320,000 on the mortgage. If the house prices drop, 10%, you may be able to sell it and pay off your mortgage, but you still lost money. So I think a lot of people are talking about underwater. I think that we have not seen the beginning of this housing crash. I think that we're going to see it get even deeper. We're definitely seeing the 10% that I've talked about in a lot of markets.
Yes.
10%. I said 15% in certain markets, maybe 20%. But that's what a lot of these other people are talking about as far as being underwater. What happens is another thing that could bring them underwater, and I don't want to go down this road too far, But, the number one reason for people losing their houses is lack of income. And that comes from many different reasons. Maybe it's medical, maybe they've been laid off, which is the probable, of the two. They lost their job. They're struggling in their house. Repairs aren't being made like we're talking about. They didn't get proper inspections, or, HVAC breaks, going to cost them $15,000. They don't have it. Now they're starting to get underwater, because if they have to sell or foreclosed on, that's a whole new set of problems. So, were people, is it bad that they went crazy and paid too much for houses? Guys, we've had the charts. The chart, you look at, from the 60s all the way up to 2 years ago, and there are many reasons why. Stay tuned. Saturday's video, we're going to talk about, the Fed's decision to, lower rates and do things that really jack the prices up. But, if you bought in the last 2 years, you bought in, depending on where in that 2 years, you bought in the historical highs we've ever seen, and the greatest appreciation ever in the housing market. So when people are talking about, is that going to go, kind of neutral and flat, or will we see a recession in house prices, which I believe? And then how long will it take for the prices to go over? Some people that bought in 2006, just today or 3 months ago or 4 months ago, got up to the price that they paid for the house that they bought in 2006.
Right.
So if they sold the house prior to 2022, the spring or January, if they sold it prior to that, they lost money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So getting back on track, let's talk about, so just to kind of recap, let's talk about the inspector. Make sure that they get on the roof, make sure that they know what they're talking about. They've got many years of inspecting houses, or that they've been contractors. Make sure that they bring a moisture meter. If you have a basement, a lot of one of the conversations with my attorney was, he said that a lot of the inspectors here in Maryland aren't carrying moisture meters, and he threw a percentage out there. I don't know if it's right or not, but he said a large percentage, let's put it that way, of the inspectors, I guess, that he's seeing coming into court, testifying or things like that, or saying things like, well, did you bring a moisture meter? They have water penetration in the basement. It wasn't disclosed. You got a home inspection. Did you use a moisture meter? And a lot of the inspectors are saying no. And the reason that they're saying that is because they said that the agents wouldn't use them if they did. So, I don't know the validity of that, or, what agent would say that. That's terrible. But I want my inspectors to have moisture meters. If they're in the basement, they actually stick the meter to the wall, and it will give a reading to alert the buyer that, hey, there's more, moisture on this wall. Have it evaluated.
Yeah, I know. And we have seen it where basements have been, painted over. There's really no way that moisture meter is going to be able to definitely tell you about that in the basement. Yes. Mold-like growth. I'm not a mold expert, but you can see if there's biological growth, is what we call it, that's happening on the walls anywhere. Mm-hmm.
You're looking at where the furnace is, which could be, depending on, where you are, which state you're in, if you don't have a basement, the furnace room's very commonplace for biological growth, mold. Crawl spaces, make sure they're going into crawl spaces. If there's a crawl space, I want to make sure my home inspector can fit in it. If they are bigger than the crawl space and they say they can't get in it, that's a bad inspector for me. So as an agent, if I'm walking around a house and I see there's a little trap door underneath the house, a crawl space, if you're inspecting for my client, I want you inside that. I want you to see that their vapor barrier is properly installed. I want to see that there's no water moisture coming in underneath the house. Make sure there's no biological growth, mold. Make sure that there's proper insulation underneath the floor joists to make sure that that is all well. So your inspector needs to go there. And appliances, they're going to run every single appliance in the house. If there's a drain where there's no washing machine hooked up to, like the story I just told run water down it, make sure it's draining.
Mm-hmm.
Important note here, guys, to make. The inspector probably is not going to move furniture. They're not allowed to here. I don't know about your state. So if there's an outlet behind the wall or a cellar is camouflaging something because of a piece of furniture, your home inspector is not going to pick it up. If you're looking in the fine print, it probably says that in their agreement that you're going to sign before they work for you. So if you're getting the home inspection, make sure you're telling the listing agent that all walls must be free and clear for inspection. If that means that they need to pull the couch out from the wall, slide the couch out from the wall.
Yep. Very, very good point. I do want to bring up, because I know we're getting, to that hour mark. I do want to talk about home inspections for new constructions. I think it's very important because I think that everyone, if you are not informed, you go to, the new home, the site, you pick your property, they start building, and they tell you they're going to give you an inspection at the end, and then you'll be on your way. I think it's extremely important that they call it a third party inspector, but it's incredibly important that you do hire a home inspector and they do walk through, because we have seen on occasion where there are things that are wrong with a home, brand new home. No one's even been inside.
I feel my blood boiling. I feel my blood boiling.
Well, it's disappointing.
Guys, look, we're talking about builders. I've been a builder. I've built houses, not a big builder. I built mostly scattered lots, which means, there's a lot in between two existing houses. But a lot of these big builders, they're like bullies to the buyers. They want to push things. So, a lot of times I get people to say, do I need an agent if I'm dealing with the bully, the big builder? And I'm saying 100%, because somebody needs to pump the brakes a little bit, be the voice of, reason to say, look, they want you to close on the house. And, we had a situation where, the buyer was being bullied. You need to close on this date, and they're moving out of state, and, dates were all screwed up, and, things weren't happening the way that they should. But they were pushing for that close date, working 7 days a week, sloppy.
They were feeling the pressure. If they didn't have you, which is just another reason why you absolutely need an agent in the new construction transaction, because had they not had Todd, it would have been very easy for them to be like, you know what? I don't want to deal with it. We're just going to follow what they say.
I said, let me be, in this case, the bad guy. Look, we're not settling on that. They're not settling on that date. We're pushing things. We're rushing. Forget it. We're backing it up.
Yeah.
They had the rate lock. They still had time. It's like, no, we're going to make sure that we do the right things, that the client is satisfactory. We did multiple inspections, closing inspections. Things still weren't right. No. We brought in an independent contractor, inspector, who found things. You were there, Melissa.
Yeah. There was, for example, a warped door in the basement, and then because of that, there was gapping around the seal on the edge of the door. That anything could go in there. Moisture, water, bugs. And they were just, I don't want to assume, but it just did not seem it was of high priority, because they didn't even know it was there until it was pointed out.
There were drainage issues that were going on, where there were negative grades, there was downspouts dumping out, water coming back into the house, into the sump pump drain. So when you're dealing with new construction, definitely get your third party inspectors in there. A lot of times people say, well, why do you need that? You've had the county inspectors through. They are not looking at the things that independent inspector is going to look at. They're looking at code. And that's one of the things the builder said, well, we got our clear. We had our use and occupancy permit. We're going, well, that's not satisfactory for the client. And so we backed things up. We fought. And then what we did was we, made sure that we had a due slip if, they got to the point where things weren't done, and, they do have a warranty. But guys, you don't want people coming. If you're buying a new house, what good's the warranty? You move in And now you have contractors working there and making dust and making a mess and things like that, required to be done before you close. Just refuse. So you know what? You get this done and then we'll close.
Yep.
They'll get it done. Believe me, they are not going to. In this situation, the buyers were like, are they going to cancel the contract? And I was like, no way.
Yeah.
No way they're going to kick you to the curb.
No.
They're going to make you happy. So don't be bullied by your new builder.
No, and that was a real fear for them. And again, like, you were the voice of reason. You calmed it all down. You brought it all back in, but
they didn't like me very much.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. But
It's fine.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I got broad shoulders.
Yeah. Yes, you do. Yeah.
What else? We got any questions here before we sign off? I know
let's just see. Oh, this is a very good one. Vault. Will a home inspector look at trees on the property that may be a problem to the home, such as being too close or tree is dead and needs to be cut down? That can be costly.
they should. And tree work is very costly and it's dangerous. I mean, you want a professional to do it. The inspector should certainly, if the shrubbery are too close to the foundation, they're touching the foundation, the windows, they will recommend trimming it away. That's not what I would consider a deal killer in most cases, but the trees can be very costly. Even a neighbor's tree that's dead, hovering over top of your garage or any part of your house can be a hazard, can be dangerous. The situation is, can you make the seller, cut down the neighbor's tree? No. But you can certainly put that neighbor on notice, that they can be held responsible in those cases. I've been told by insurance agencies, the question always was, the tree falls, it's the responsibility of who? The neighbor who had the dead tree or the person it fell on. And, I've heard it both ways. I have seen personally now where the landowners, that the neighbor has been held responsible and for, damage and to the neighbor's property, mostly when they've been put on notice that there is a safety issue. But the caveat here is, what if you're buying it and there's no leaves on the trees because it's cold outside, the tree's dormant? So, it is at that point, if you have concern, they're big trees that could cost $6,000-$7,000 for a tree to be removed. Yeah. And more importantly, if that tree is one of the reasons why you bought the house. I hear that all the time. Well, I bought this house because of its trees or because of the big tree or the shade, the privacy. So, I don't recommend buying a house because of that, because trees die. Yeah. But certainly the inspector should be picking that up unless it's fall.
Yeah.
Or winter.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, anything else?
That's it. Just thanks, guys. I learned a lot for the next time I buy another house. Fantastic.
One of the if you appreciate what we're doing here, one of the best things you can do for us is hit that like button. It lets us know that you did like the video. And guys, we always appreciate it when you subscribe and hit the alert bell. It lets you know when we upload content like this. Share us with your friends or anybody that you think can benefit by hearing some sound real estate advice.
Absolutely. And guys, love the questions. Thanks. The comments always. And then, as Todd mentioned prior, the email ts@sachsrealty.com. You have questions, you need help in your neck of the woods, always reach out.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. We will see you next time.
See you next time.